Hello and welcome to Trojan Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. With me today is Dr. Lance Tatum, Senior Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, but also heads up the Coronavirus Task Force here at Troy University. Lance, thanks for joining us here today.
Happy to be here, Aaron.
And we brought you here for the Coronavirus Task Force portion of your responsibilities because there has been an amendment to kind of the guidelines for the university, and something that you said early on you knew with the potential to happen.
Right.
So kind of talk about what went into this, and first what the new amendment is, and we'll talk about what went into making this decision.
So yeah, be happy to. Let me back up just a little bit. So on August the 5th, we put out a set of guidelines, expectations. They were very broad-based. We knew that there'd be some detail we'd have to work out once the semester really got going. We followed that up with a set of guidelines on August the 19th that specifically dealt with what we would do in the classroom. It became apparent pretty quickly after we put those out that there were going to be some challenges to that. Primarily the disruption of instruction that was going to occur because of the exposure piece of this. We did not mandate masks at the beginning of the semester, which caused us to really take a look at who was going to be exposed within the classroom setting. So with all that being said, starting this week, Monday morning at 8 a.m., we actually put in place a mask requirement for indoors here at Troy, and also in Montgomery, Dothan, and Phoenix City. But specifically, we spent a lot of time talking about the Troy campus aspect of this. We are, students, faculty, staff, if you're indoors in a classroom, in common areas where you can't socially distance, we want to go ahead and make sure that everybody's wearing a mask. We're doing this so that we can hopefully keep the number of exposures and the number of quarantines down, which will keep students in class and keep us at least somewhere around this idea of normal operations.
And what brought this about? What were you seeing? Right. What trends were you seeing, and what were you seeing here on campus that made you make that jump to go ahead and get it back?
So the task force looked at a number of different metrics to come to this conclusion. I mean, we certainly looked at the number of active positive cases that we were seeing on the Troy campus. Those numbers were higher than last year's August numbers, although we had actually starting to see a plateau and kind of a trending down of numbers, but still higher than last fall. And that makes sense because last fall we had social distancing in place, we had other measures in place. The other thing that we really looked at, though, was the disruption to the instructional delivery in the class. We had situations where classes, more than half the class, was having to quarantine because of one single exposure in the class. That's not part of the promise that we made last spring leading into this fall. Students were having to figure out how to get content through Canvas or through synchronous delivery. Our faculty really were being put under a lot of pressure to try to manage all that within the class. And so working with Faculty Senate and working with other members of the academic administration, the decision was made to go to the Chancellor and make this recommendation that we put everybody in a mask, which helps us maintain consistency of instruction, which is really beyond the safety of our students, our staff, and our faculty is our second priority.
Yeah, and just making sure you can keep that status quo going as closely as possible. Right. And one of the things, especially with this new amendment was brought up, is you're not affecting class numbers. You're not going into pods.
That's right.
At this point, you're keeping it. Mask is the first level of what you're doing here.
That's right. So we've been emphasizing the vaccination piece, which is still very, very important to us, and we're very encouraged with the number of faculty and staff who are getting vaccinated, and the number of students who are signing up for our incentive program. We can talk about that a little bit later. But so the vaccinations are the first level of protection, but then the mask is the added piece to this that we just really felt like it was prudent to do that at this time.
And of course, this is a temporary mask order, and that was another thing that a lot of folks wanted to know about, is the fact that you're going to revisit this in a short amount of time.
Yeah, so we put the order into place, or the requirement into place for 3 weeks. This gets us beyond Labor Day, which is another point of possible spike in numbers. The Corona Task Force will pull itself back together around the 15th of September. Look at the metrics, look at the case count, look at the exposure count, look at what's happening in the state trend data. See how, in fact, we've been operating within the classroom. Is this something we need to continue or something we need to go ahead and pull off? And we'll make that recommendation to the Chancellor by the 17th. That's the last date. The 17th of September at 5 o'clock is when this particular guideline expires.
And we mentioned the incentive plan for the students. This is a way, vaccinations, you said, is the first line of defense. And what is it? mean to be able to offer these students this chance opportunity who should be vaccinated already, but give a chance for them to maybe profit a little bit from getting vaccinated?
So I think the whole conversation around vaccinations is this idea of choice, right? Mm-hmm. Now we have this sense of public health, and we all are very committed to this idea of public health, but really there's a lot of conversation around the vaccines, and so we didn't want to put students into a position of having to feel forced, right? That's really not the way to do this, in our opinion. So we did come up with this idea of incentivizing a good choice. And so the Student Services Division, Sohail Agbotwala, our SVC for Student Affairs, he and his staff came up with this idea of offering students the opportunity of gaining scholarships, gaining meal plans, gaining dining dollars, as a way of saying, if you'll do this, we'll try to reward you in some way. That's been kicked off. We've had over 800 students who have actually registered for the incentive program. Now, they will have to show verification of being vaccinated before they are actually awarded. But yeah, good response so far.
Well, good. And anyone needs information about this, right, troy.edu/coronavirus at any point. Thank you very much for joining us today and give us an update on COVID. Bring you back once we have another update for COVID.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you for joining us on today's edition of Trojan Talk.